The night of June 13, 2025 will forever be etched into the memory of the Middle East. It began not with a declaration, but with the terrifying shriek of jet engines tearing through the pre-dawn stillness over Tehran. For the residents of the Iranian capital, sleep was shattered by a series of powerful, earth-shaking explosions that lit up the horizon with an angry orange glow. This was not a test. This was not a drill. This was the opening salvo of a conflict long feared, but, until this moment, held at bay by a fragile thread of diplomacy. The targets were precise, chosen with deadly intent, Iran's most sensitive and heavily fortified nuclear facilities. Panic quickly spread through the city's streets as air raid sirens wailed their mournful, belated warning. From balconies and rooftops, citizens stared in disbelief at plumes of thick black smoke billowing into the sky from the direction of known research and enrichment sites. The air crackled with tension and the smell of cordite. Social media feeds exploded with grainy videos of the blasts, each clip a testament to the chaos and fear gripping the nation. The initial shock soon gave way to a chilling realization. Israel had crossed a line, turning years of covert operations and heated rhetoric into open, undeniable warfare on Iranian soil. The attack was a symphony of destruction, meticulously planned and executed with terrifying efficiency. Reports trickled in of strikes not just near Tehran, but also on the deeply buried Fordo facility and the sprawling nuclear complex at Natanz. Israeli fighter jets, flying under the radar and employing advanced electronic warfare, had penetrated Iran's air defenses to deliver their devastating payloads. Each explosion was a message, a calculated blow designed to cripple Iran's nuclear ambitions. For the Israeli pilots returning to their bases, it was a mission accomplished. But for the millions of people across the region, it was the start of a terrifying new chapter. As the sun rose over a smoke-filled sky, the full scope of the assault began to emerge. The world watched, stunned by the audacity of the Israeli operation. This was not a limited strike, it was a comprehensive and aggressive campaign to dismantle the infrastructure of Iran's nuclear program. International news channels broadcast the dramatic images, and the global community held its breath. The quiet diplomacy that had been taking place behind the scenes was now in ruins, replaced by the loud, brutal language of war. The first shots had been fired, and the question on everyone's mind was no longer if Iran would respond, but when, and how severely. In Jerusalem, the justification for the attack was delivered with grim determination. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed his nation and the world, his face a mask of resolve. He declared that Israel had been left with no other choice. He framed the military operation not as an act of aggression, but as a preemptive strike essential for the nation's survival. Iran's relentless pursuit of nuclear weapons is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival, Netanyahu stated, his voice firm. He claimed that intelligence gathered by Mossad indicated that Iran was only a few months away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon, a red line that Israel could never allow to be crossed. The Prime Minister's words painted a picture of a nation pushed to the edge, forced to act unilaterally to neutralize an existential threat. He detailed Iran's recent escalations, its production of more near-bomb-grade uranium, its installation of advanced centrifuges, and its defiance of the International Atomic Energy Agency. For the Israeli government, the collapse of diplomatic negotiations was the final straw. We will continue this operation for as many days as it takes to remove this threat, Netanyahu vowed, signaling that the initial wave of strikes was just the beginning. The goal was clear, to set back Iran's nuclear program by years, if not destroy it completely. Behind this public declaration was a deep-seated fear that has long permeated Israeli security circles. The memory of past threats and the specter of a nuclear-armed Iran, a state that has repeatedly called for Israel's destruction, fueled the decision to act. The Israeli military and intelligence services had spent years preparing for this exact scenario, developing the technology and tactics needed to penetrate some of the most heavily defended airspace in the world. They believed that the window of opportunity to act was closing fast, and that the risks of inaction far outweighed the dangers of a full-scale regional conflict. This gamble, however, was made without the explicit backing of Israel's most powerful ally. The Trump administration in the United States had publicly stated it would not participate militarily, a significant divergence in policy. Just a day before, President Trump had acknowledged an attack could very well happen, but had also expressed his desire for a diplomatic solution. Israel's decision to proceed anyway underscores the depth of its conviction that it stood alone in facing this threat. It was a calculated risk, a high-stakes bet that a decisive military blow could succeed where years of sanctions and talks had failed. The response from Tehran was swift, furious, and unequivocal. As emergency services sifted through the rubble of the targeted sites, Iran's leadership unleashed a torrent of rage. The attack was denounced as an act of Zionist terrorism and a blatant violation of international law. General Hossein Salami, the powerful commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, appeared on state television, his expression radiating cold fury. He declared that Iran was fully prepared for war, promising a response that would be more painful and more destructive than anything Israel had ever experienced. The time for restraint, he warned, was over. Iran's threats were not idle boasts. The nation's military has spent years developing a formidable arsenal, particularly its ballistic missile program. U.S. intelligence estimates that Iran possesses over 2,000 missiles, many of which are capable of reaching any point in Israel. General Salami ominously declared that the targets for retaliation had already been selected, sending a chill through Israeli cities and military bases. The Iranian government also made it clear that it held the United States partially responsible, threatening to strike American forces and interests throughout the Persian Gulf, putting the 40,000 U.S. personnel in the region directly in the line of fire. The anger felt by the leadership was mirrored on the streets. Crowds gathered in major cities chanting "Death to Israel" and burning Israeli flags. While many citizens lived in fear of the coming conflict, a potent wave of nationalist fervor swept through the country. The Israeli strike, intended to weaken the regime, had also served to rally a significant portion of the population around it. For them, this was a matter of national pride and sovereignty. The attack was seen as an unprovoked assault on their nation's scientific progress and its right to defend itself, and the calls for a punishing retaliation grew louder by the hour. Inside the halls of power, Iran's leaders were weighing their options. A massive direct missile barrage on Israeli cities was on the table, a move that could overwhelm Israel's sophisticated air defense systems like the Iron Dome and David's Sling. Another option involved activating its network of proxy forces across the region, such as Hezbollah and Lebanon, to open multiple fronts against Israel. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who was scheduled to attend a final round of nuclear talks, declared that diplomacy was dead. Iran now felt unbound by any previous commitments, vowing to accelerate its nuclear program in defiance of the attack. The Israeli strike sent shockwaves far beyond the Middle East, placing the entire world on high alert. In Washington, the Trump administration scrambled to manage the fallout. While publicly maintaining its position of not providing direct military support to Israel, the U.S. military moved to a heightened state of readiness. The USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group patrolled the Arabian Sea, a visible symbol of American power. Across the Persian Gulf, American troops conducted bunker dive drills, preparing for the Iranian retaliation that now seemed inevitable. The U.S. was walking a tightrope, trying to deter a wider war while protecting its own assets in a region teetering on the brink of explosion. The atmosphere among civilians in both Israel and Iran was thick with anxiety. In Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, daily life was punctured by the constant blare of news alerts and the quiet hum of fear. Schools reviewed their emergency procedures and citizens checked the readiness of their bomb shelters. The bravado of their leaders did little to quell the deep-seated worry about what Iran's painful retaliation would look like. In Iran, the mood was a volatile mix of patriotic anger and profound dread. People stocked up on food and water, fearing not only Israeli counterstrikes, but also the devastating economic and social consequences of a prolonged war. Global markets reacted with predictable panic. Oil prices surged on fears of disruptions to the critical shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. World leaders issued urgent calls for restraint, and the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. But their words felt hollow in the face of such a dramatic escalation. The diplomatic off-ramps that had existed just days before were now blocked by the rubble of the bombed facilities and the hardened positions of the warring nations. The international community was largely a spectator to a conflict it could not control. As the sun set on this momentous day, a heavy sense of uncertainty hung over the globe. The immediate question was not if, but how and where Iran would strike back. Would it unleash its missile arsenal directly on Israel? Would it target American bases? Would it activate its proxies to ignite a multi-front war? Every possible scenario was fraught with catastrophic potential. The Israeli strike had torn open a new violent chapter in the long-running shadow war. Now a region and the world hold their breath, caught in the terrifying silence between the thunder of the attack and the lightning of the response that is sure to come.